So we are all aware of, the tremendous work that ONDC is, doing for us. And, you know, uh, while everybody knows, probably in detail as well, but we'd like to hear from you again. In terms of, the transformation that digital technology has actually brought in the traditional e-commerce experience, and what are the most significant benefits that consumers and sellers are experiencing today post, the evolution and the growth in the digital technologies?
Sure, and I'd like to start with the whole background of how ONDC came about, and then what were the problems that mostly people started feeling in the ecosystem. If you look at the evolution of digital technology, or the businesses or enterprises, it started with digital enabled organizations to digital driven organizations, and now we have digital native organizations who are born in the digital landscape. What has happened over time is, a lot of varied platforms with their own set of implementations actually came about. Now, when you have a platform, right, every platform has its own set of limitations, right? So, and because of that, what happened is there were a variety of platforms which are, trying to solve for a variety of different problems. And this is where I think the architects of DPI figured out that India, with her diversity and unique scale problems, there needs to be a framework that will allow the businesses and the enterprises to exchange values on standard rails, right? What started happening was, and specifically in e-commerce landscape, you started seeing few large e-commerce players started becoming, at the forefront. And because of the capacity issues, because of course, their own business models, it basically the growth came to standstill, right? We have seen the growth of e-commerce in the last 10 years from mere 1 to 2% to about 8-9%, but it has stagnated. Over the last 4 to 5 years, it has not moved beyond. Fundamentally, and it actually was, the problem was magnified when COVID came into the existence, and we figured out that there is definitely a capacity problem that is existing in the ecosystem. During the COVID times, we figured out that the consumers wanting products is not reaching them, and especially the suppliers and the logistics. While in local landscape, they were able to provide these services, the moment it came for the large distance deliveries, all these problems compounded into a completely shutdown of e-commerce ecosystem. And this is where I think the DPIT, which is our parent organization, we source our inspiration from, thought of creating an unbundled framework, right? Idea was to democratize e-commerce, where the consumers have more options to choose from without having to shift from one platform to another. And the sellers have access to the larger demand beyond the platform that they are integrated with. And that is where ONDC was born. ONDC was born with an idea of creating standard rails. We already had a framework called Beacon existing, and the Kochi Open Mobility Network was the first manifestation of Beacon ecosystem. ONDC took inspiration from that and created a standard framework or standard rails for transactions to happen, and this large pool of demand to meet large pool of supplies to avoid any sort of either supply side or a demand side shock. I think with ONDC, our intent is to provide the digital rails to the most depraved of section of the society, for them to be able to add value with their unique proposition to the large pool of demand that is out there. So I think this is what ONDC's mission is. We are making a small impact, but then these small incremental changes are actually bringing a large impact to the overall ecosystem.
Right. You come, with a long experience in this domain. So, for you, how has it been, your experience at ONDC? And while you said, the aim is actually, to democratize e-commerce, how do you see, the evolution happening? What is the kind of response you receive? And, what are the basic challenges that, the sellers actually, come to ONDC with?
Very interesting question, and it's a question that I keep getting asked, not in forums like this, but when I talk to the larger ecosystem. I think India is a diverse country. It's highly diverse in all aspects, whether it's education, whether it's digital evolution. However, with advent of simplification of technologies, for example, for communication, smartphones are becoming the tool for all interfaces. People are able to operate WhatsApp. Even people with minimum amount of education, with a simple, smartphone in their hand, are able to operate. I think the whole idea about democratization is to first create rails where the smaller section of technology pool, which are fundamentally a very bouquet, software development firms, can actually create tools and utilities to enable these small MSMEs, small, manufacturers, small sellers across the breadth of India, right? From high class tier 1 urban cities to a tier 4 and rural landscape. And we have, such people on ONDC who have developed solutions to enable. The Mandeshi is a very classic example that I keep quoting. It's actually a women's self-help group. They basically collate and create smaller groups of women in rural and tier 4, tier 3 cities who basically make very specific products, and it's available on ONDC. You can go and buy. So the idea is to create simplified solutions for the sellers to become digitally visible. Cataloging is a very important element here. So there are people who are developing solutions that automatically take pictures and create catalog for people to sort of be able to sell those items. On the buyer side, there are unique, experiences depending upon the maturity of the buyer. People can either use a very high-end mobile app. From there to somebody simply using a voice text on a WhatsApp and are still being able to buy. So I think the democratization basically not only comes from creating inclusion and creating doors for those people to walk in, it is also about enabling them to walk that step by making technology simple for them to use and understand.
Right. So, while definitely, it's a creditable, wonderful initiative, for, making technology simple for them. But technology is moving at a very fast pace, and by the time we are able to, reach out to these people to make them understand the basics, technology has moved, really far ahead. So, how do you see ONDC playing a role there? What are the next steps? What are the, what is the future plans that, you have that? How do you see, in bridging this gap?
I think one of the statements that I'll make, which has pretty much been cliched to anyone that you ask about ONDC is not a platform, right? ONDC is a network. We don't own any digital asset. The only digital asset that we own is a small registry and a gateway, which only helps in discovery of these providers, right? So any buyer sitting on any buyer app on the network will be able to explore all the inventory that is available across on the network, not necessarily being available on the same platform. So I think the evolution of technology will keep happening. My view is the technology evolution is happening in order to make lives simpler and easier for people to engage with digital technologies. I think it is a good thing to happen. From ONDC perspective, as we move and as we proceed, we expect the participants' ecosystem to participate more with technology tools, use cases, and contribute to the larger cause. Eventually, ONDC intends to become an IETF. What IETF is for internet and internet technologies, ONDC will basically become an organization what Internet of E-commerce is going to be. It is one initiative which is basically born, made, built, developed, evolved in India under the premises of DPI. Our idea is to take it global. Our idea is to take the same framework to variety of other countries where there are problems to be solved. The problems of democratization of commerce is a very important problem to solve across the globe. And I think for ONDC, besides creating an ecosystem of innovation and contribution, we also want to take ONDC across borders to make sure not only interoperability between the economics of, or the economies which are or downtrodden economies of the world to interact with each other, including that of India.
Right, sir. Before I proceed, any questions from the audience? If you have anything to ask, anything? Okay, I think. Oh yeah, sure. Okay, Ankur, can we have the mic this side, please? Ma'am, you could also introduce yourself.
So myself, Divya Bhargav. I am Senior Manager, Amway, India, in Technology Department. So I'm also like working since long on e-commerce things and all those platforms. Though my question is very basic, I heard you all what is the background of ONDC, but I am also trying to understand what actually ONDC is. So is it kind of a e-commerce platform which is open for all? Anybody can come and display their products like it's because I heard it is kind of a replacement of Amazon and Walmart and other things, and we are building our own. India is building its own platform which will be more accessible to the masses. Is it the right picture or?
As I said in the beginning, right, it has become very cliched. ONDC is not a platform. Actually, the problem that ONDC is solving is deplatformization, right? You come from a platform background and you will understand, and especially when there are peak days, there are capacity issues. There will always, a platform can only grow to a certain extent. If I have to draw a parallel, how do you think internet grew? How do you think email ecosystem grew, right? Email ecosystem, if you talk about late 80s, early 90s, every organization had their own email ecosystem with their own specific implementation for message exchange, right? From there, internet became the email became an internet revolution where distinct email services were able to talk to each other. How was that enabled? I mean, if you imagine that the 8 billion population of the globe have to have an email address and being able to interact with each other, do you think a single email platform will be able to solve for that problem? An answer is no, right? You cannot create so many mailboxes at one place. So this is where SMTP actually revolutionized the email infrastructure across the globe. Nobody needs to have, as long as you have an identifiable identity, right? As far as you are discoverable, there is fundamentally no need for you to have an email inbox on every single email server in the world. And that is how the email ecosystem actually grew. We are trying to solve the same thing for ONDC. You may be with Amway, there could be somebody with Amazon, there could be somebody with Flipkart. If all of them actually become participants of the network and are able to interoperate using standards, right? And when I say standards, protocols, right? So ONDC is based on beacon as a protocol with its own implementation of beacon, similar to what happens with HTTP, right? So if you look at ONDC is an unbundled network, right? With multiple constituents. There could be a constituent from a buyer side, there could be a constituent from a seller side, there could be a constituent from financial side also, right? All of them together, if they are able to discover each other and transact on standard rails and standard protocols, they are able to exchange value. And you can actually create a unified and seamless experience to a buyer by sourcing resources from all the places which are available on the network and connected on the network. So it's a network, not a platform, in short, is what I will say.
No, I'm able to make out because we also tried our products to integrate there. So I'm able to connect the dots and I'm able to visualize.
Please join ONDC. We'll more than happy for, you said Amway, right? Yes. You're more than happy to integrate Amway into ONDC. Your products will become available to across at least 40-45 buyer apps that we have today. So please plan to join ONDC.
Sure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any other question? Yes, can we have the mic here, please?
ONDC only for products or also for the services?
Anything that is transactable and SKUable is can be transacted using ONDC as a protocol. So when you say goods have a very well-defined catalog. Services have their own set of catalog. So anything that can be cataloged and can be identified as a unique SKU, right? For example, you're looking for services, let's say financial services. You're trying to buy, let's say, a loan. Loan becomes an SKU, right? Which comes in its own varieties. ONDC very well supports it. In fact, we have FIS domain live on our network. Health services is going live, in next couple of weeks. So you have a lot of services also coming on ONDC rails.
In terms of visibility, suppose somebody wants to do it, how can we basically promote the product there on ONDC platform? Is there a mechanism?
Absolutely. As long as, ONDC, as I said, is a network of constituents and people who actually constitute the network. It manifests itself by participants trying to integrate with each other on standard rails. If you want to promote a product, you need to either build your own seller app and become a network participant, because there are a lot of D2C brands who are also integrated. Or you come through any of the network participants who are more of seller aggregator marketplace and can promote product from those seller apps. So yes, both the options are available for you.
And easy to register, I guess, for anybody.
As network participants, easy to register, but there is a journey, because if you have to implement, let's say, an email service in your organization, you must have an understanding of SMTP and many other aspects of UI, giving experiences to your email users. As long as you have it, more than welcome, and it's easy to integrate, to be honest with you.
Great. Okay, we have another question. Ankur, this side.
Hello. Hi, sir. So I work at Zippy.
You work at?
It's a company called Zippy. We take care of logistics services for e-commerce and D2C brands. So I just had one question for you, which is ONDC aims to democratize the e-commerce domain and remove certain monopolies that currently exist because of bigger companies coming in earlier in this domain, right? So do you think after one point, when the scale goes beyond a point and you've onboarded a lot of sellers on ONDC and the buyer apps, which are the consumer-facing platform for the buyers, those would be limited compared to the sellers on the platform. So do you think ONDC would be completely able to remove that buyer app bias, where there are certain cases where if a product is being sold by a lot of sellers, the results are shown on the buyer app side. So if the scale goes beyond a point, then there is a buyer app bias which will come, where certain entries or certain results would be shown before certain other results. And then again, we're going towards that point where discoverability is there. A local seller might be available on a buyer app, but if he's positioned at maybe a 400th position in the search list, then again, it certainly to some point defeats the purpose, right?
So, a very good question. I mean, to be very honest with you, the network is still evolving. Some of these policies will get established, but I'll give you my personal opinion, and then we can actually delve a little deeper into what ONDC is trying to do to solve this problem, right? My view is there are variety of buyers with variety of requirements, and I said India is a very unique country and very unique economy because of the diversity and the scale that it brings in. Nowhere in the globe you've heard of systems like Aadhaar, systems like GSTN, systems like UPI. So India's problems are unique, and it requires unique solutions. To your question, whether I see limited number of buyer apps and seller apps, I don't think so, because not all buyer apps will be able to provide all the services.
Correct.
Plus, I don't see the number of buyer apps getting limited. We now are seeing, because if you look at consumer side of the story, there are a lot of consumer interfaces that are available. Newspapers is one,
True.
Right? Newspaper apps are another. We are in touch with the association of magazines who are trying to integrate. They bring in a lot of unique buyers, from the platform, giving unique experiences. Therefore, the avenues for sellers to be visible are going to be significant. I don't see a reason why we don't see a buyer ecosystem growing, right? And each buyer has distinct requirements. I mean, some of us would want to love and go to a 5-star hotel and have a coffee. But some of us love to go to this, Pant ka tapari and have that cutting chai. And I love it, by the way.
Right.
So there are diverse types of buyers with diverse requirement. I think at some point in time, the buyer apps will decide what kind of buyers they want to focus and, provide experiences with. So that is the first part of the question. How ONDC is trying to do is, besides the protocols that we are drafting, we are also writing certain network policies.
Right.
The principles behind network policies that we actually say is, as a participant, you are allowed to differentiate. And when I say differentiate, you can bring in differential services on the network. You can say that, because you are a prime customer for me, I'm going to waive off, hypothetically talking, your logistics fees, right? Similarly, you can offer specific credit card services or credit card discounts, things like that, right? So as part of policy, we are saying you are allowed to differentiate, but principally you cannot discriminate. You cannot say that because Nitin, I don't like the name, his products, I'm not going to render on my platform, or I'm going to sort down or sort out. But every buyer app must have very strict conditions defined as part of their static terms, which is part of your transaction journey, to define what is the minimum criteria for somebody to get visible on their buyer app. There are rails available, and sellers clearly know if they want to be ranked higher on a search listing, what all parameters they have to actually work upon. Fill rate could be an example.
Right.
Quality of catalog that you're sending could be an example.
Right.
The number of successful orders without cancellation that you have offered could be another. All these buyer apps will basically put these conditions forth for sellers to improve upon, and then be able to be visible on the top echelons of the search listing. So these are two ways or two parts I want to answer your question. I'm sorry for a long answer, but I just wanted to put the context in there.
Yeah, I mean, that really helped me understand that bit of the network. So thanks a lot.
Great. Okay. Oh, okay, sure. I think after this we'll have to wrap it because we are running short of time here. Ankur, this side, please.
Hi, I am Meha. I'm from Sun Life. So the question which I have is from the answers which you have just given to us. So one thing which you mentioned that, one thing you have mentioned that you are trying to come out from the platform to the decoupled platform kind of model, right? But the question which I say that nowadays, if you will go to any platforms, right, be it Facebook, Instagram, Salesforce, you will go for Tableau, you will go to Informatica, everybody is selling themselves as a complete platform, right? You will just use it, plug it, and there you go. So I'm just trying to understand that is it a new way of working, like people are trying to decouple within the platforms, or it's just a way of selling ONDC?
So let me start with the same thing that I started earlier. ONDC is not a platform. ONDC is not on a mission to deplatformize, right? We are creating a way for people to deplatformize, to think in building blocks model rather than a large monolith platform model, right? You gave an example of Informatica and Viva, right? Is another example that you gave, right? Informatica has its own way, has its own standards, has its own way of working within their platform. Viva has its own. Can we create a way where these two platforms can talk to each other and exchange value ecosystem is what ONDC is doing.
But still then you are giving a platform for people to integrate with your platform, right? Whatever you will call it, but still it's a way for people to integrate within themselves. So it's another platform.
Yes, of course. I mean, when I say deplatformization, it doesn't take away the need of you having to develop a particular software and host it somewhere, right? That is not deplatformization. When I say deplatformization, is fundamentally means that you basically now move away from building large monoliths to a smaller building blocks, right? Even and I think people from software background will not be too unaware of the concept of unbundling. From a monolith, you started going to microservices. Now you have authentication running as a parallel microservice. So you've already started unbundling. ONDC is taking it to a next level where the interoperability can happen on standard protocols between distinct platforms, right? When you say distinct platforms, there could be Amazon, there could be Flipkart, there could be, Paytm. All three of them, if they are able to interact on standards. When I say standards, there is, so backend is basically based on DOF framework, which is discovery, order fulfillment, and post-fulfillment. As long as you are able to implement these principles, you are able to interact with any third-party platform who may be having their own protocols for their internal processes, but for all external-facing applications and value exchange, you use standards. So deplatformization fundamentally do not mean that you kill what is running. Deplatformization fundamentally means you start looking at values in building blocks and then make sure these building blocks are able to talk to each other. For example, you may be on an e-commerce website, you are trying to buy an item. You also want to, get trained on that particular item. You also want to sort of finance that item and say that, I may not want to, pay it all together. Do all platforms have the capability unless they have one-to-one integration with all possible, ecosystem? That is what ONDC is solving. As a buyer platform, you can actually spray your requirement to the network with an intent to seek something. And the whole network will make sure that the resources that are required to fulfill a need is actually made available to one particular platform. So that is the problem that we are trying to solve in a building block model.
Okay, got it. So it's another way of calling something differently from the platform, but I got your point. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I think we actually, had a lot of interesting insights coming from the audience and from you, but I'm really, the the conversation, I would have loved to carry forward this, but our time's up. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
It
you
was
so
wonderful
much.
having you with us.